welcome, folks, to this edition of the 700 Club. It's Holy Week for Christians all around the world. It's also expected to be the hardest, saddest week for Americans as deaths from the coronavirus spike higher and higher. There's some glimmers of hope in places like New York. What are they, and how can they help? Let's look to the light at the end of the tunnel. George Thomas has more.
With more than 1,200 people dying in just the past 24 hours, the U.S. Surgeon General is warning that the country is entering one of the most critical weeks in the battle against the virus.
The next week is going to be our Pearl Harbor moment. It's going to be our 9/11 moment. It's going to be the hardest moment for many Americans in their entire lives.
Health officials in New York, Louisiana, New Orleans and Detroit expecting infections to peak in the coming days as hospitals in these cities and across the country brace for a surge.
We know that we've got hospitals that are already at capacity. We don't have enough personal protection equipment.
Still, at his Sunday press briefing, the president expressing optimism, saying there's a leveling off of cases in places like New York, the epicenter of the viral outbreak.
Things are happening. We're starting to see light at the end of the tunnel. And hopefully in the not too distant future, we'll be very proud of the job we all did.
The president's medical experts saying that even as new cases might be leveling off, deaths will reach new highs.
It seems to be inherently contradictory, but it really isn't. What you're hearing about potential light at the end of the tunnel doesn't take away from the fact that tomorrow, the next day, it's going to look really bad.
While stay-at-home measures seem to be working, they're taking an economic toll. A new report from the Wall Street Journal says that at least 25% of the nation's economy is at a standstill. The oil industry hit hard as prices plummeted 66%, near $20 a barrel. On Capitol Hill, talk of a possible phase 4 of a coronavirus economic stimulus aimed at helping states.
This weekend, lawmakers are working on the next round of relief packages. What was not in the stimulus package that you signed last week that you would like to see in phase 4?
Well, I think we're going to need more money for the small businesses. It's been working out so well. I think that restaurants and entertainment, that would include sports leagues, all forms of entertainment, go back to the original, where they get tax deductibility for what they're doing.
Overseas, England's Prime Minister Boris Johnson leading his country from hospital after being admitted over the weekend with persistent symptoms of the virus 10 days after getting infected. On Sunday, in only the 5th of its kind, Britain's Queen Elizabeth II making a rare speech from Windsor Castle, urging the country and world to remain united and resolute against the virus.
We should take comfort that while we may have more still to endure, better days will return. We will be with our friends again. We will be with our families again. We will meet again.
For now, though, social distancing is the order of the day. At Vatican City, Pope Francis celebrating Palm Sunday in a near-empty St. Peter's Basilica, usually filled with tens of thousands of pilgrims during Easter season. The Pope offering prayer and praise for those on the front lines of the battle.
Dear friends, look at the real heroes who come to light in these days. They are not famous, rich, and successful people. Rather, they are those who give themselves in order to serve others.
Some good news. Europe's hardest hit countries like Italy, France, and Spain showing signs of progress as new cases and fatalities continue to slowly drop. George Thomas, CBN News.
George, you know, I can't remember. I don't know if it's any of our lifetime. There's been a complete shutdown of the total economy of a nation. And this thing is going to have ripples, you know, that will go on for decades. And my heart just breaks when I think of the small business people and their employees all across the country, the restaurants that are shut down. There's a new stimulus coming out. It looks like they're going to have to do something. But the bureaucracy, again, it's so difficult to get people cleared for this stuff. But the idea was to get it fast, to have the Federal Reserve Board make loans available to the banks, so the banks, certain regulations have been taken away so that they can help these small business people, because people are out of work and they don't have a paycheck and they don't know what to do, and there's a sense of hopelessness. So we really need to pray and just stand by with these people. I want to show you a little word from the Bible I think is important right now that we would put on. It's the 37th Psalm, and it said, I would have lost heart unless I had believed that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. You know, it's so easy to lose heart when you see the economy just falling to pieces around you. But I would have lost heart if I hadn't seen the goodness of the Lord. God is still a very present help in time of trouble, and he will not forsake us. But let me tell you, this thing didn't take God by surprise. Now, our CBN medical reporter, Laurie Johnson, is with us to talk about possible treatments. And Laurie, I want to ask you about the idea of some kind of a plasma coming from these people who have actually overcome this virus. Can you tell us what that will do for them or for us?
It's called convalescent plasma, and Pat, the Food and Drug Administration approved this treatment less than 2 weeks ago, and already hospitals are using it on the most critically ill patients in ICU. And basically, as you said, it takes the blood from people who have already recovered from COVID-19 and transfuses it into people who are really struggling. And the reason is because when a virus enters our body, our immune system creates antibodies that are specifically designed to get rid of that particular virus. And so it gets rid of the virus, but the antibodies remain in our blood so that if the virus ever comes back, that they can again get rid of it. And so the problem is a lot of people who don't have a strong immune system, they don't produce enough antibodies to get rid of the virus. So you take the antibodies from someone else who already has them. Again, they're very specific and particular to that virus, and give that to them. So a lot of healthcare industries are asking for people who have recovered from COVID-19 to give blood to the Red Cross. Now, you have to have been tested positive for COVID-19 before and have not had any symptoms for 2 weeks, and then get tested again to make sure that you don't have the virus. And also, Pat, what's really interesting about these antibodies is a lot of these healthcare systems affiliated with universities like Johns Hopkins, for example, are creating these antibody tests where all you have to do is take 1 drop of blood from your finger, and they can tell whether you have antibodies in your blood. So not only can you donate it to people who need it, but that shows you are immune and can go back to work. And these antibodies stay in our blood, depending on the virus, from anywhere from a year to a lifetime, like we see with chickenpox.
Right. Does injecting the antibodies, the plasma with the antibodies into a patient, does it really work? Does it cure this stuff?
Well, you know, this is a very old treatment, and they've been doing it and have had success with variations of this treatment for many years. As a matter of fact, they did this back in 1917 with the Spanish flu. But as far as what the results are right now, it's still a little bit too early to tell. Anecdotal evidence, some doctors are saying, yes, I've seen improvement with some of these critically ill patients. But again, it's only been used for the last couple of weeks in most major medical centers. So we will be seeing the results coming forth.
Last question. Why is the president saying there's light at the end of the tunnel? What is he basing that on?
Well, we have seen that these mitigation efforts, these stay-at-home measures and keeping our distance from other people are working. And so we've seen the flattening of the curve in so many places. And keep in mind that what we're seeing right now is really a reflection of what happened 2.5 weeks ago. So so we're being encouraged to keep up all this hard work that we're doing, and to stay home, and keep our distance from other people, and wear masks in public and things like that, because it's showing to have an effect. And we're seeing in places like Italy and Spain that it's also showing to have an effect on the number of new cases and the number of deaths.
For better or for worse, I think that's good news. Laurie, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Well, in other news, the coronavirus started in China. And this raises the question, are the Chinese intentionally sending dangerous substances into our country? That's an alarming statement, isn't it? But there's something called fentanyl, and it sure has been coming in. That's one of them. Ephraim Graham has that story.
Pat, a classified U.S. intelligence report concludes China is concealing the truth about the extent of the COVID-19 outbreak in its country. Bloomberg News reports the communist government is understating the number of cases and deaths from the virus. China's early reporting about COVID-19 influenced the global response and may have caused many countries to discount its severity. Also, the FBI reports U.S. customs agents have caught Chinese citizens smuggling viruses into the United States. The Hudson Institute's Robert Spalding tells CBN News none of this is surprising.
They're shipping all kinds of illicit things in the United States. I mean, we already know that they ship in, things that poison our pets or exploding toys. We also know they ship in fentanyl. Now we're finding out they're moving biological viruses across the border, not just from China to here, but from here to China. So it's really about how the Chinese Communist Party does not feel it has to obey any of the rules of the international order or even of the United States, because it feels it's entitled to create its own set of rules based on the order it wants. That's what's going on.
China has also suggested the United States is responsible for the coronavirus. China is unleashing a massive disinformation campaign cloaked in relief aid. The government facilitated a donation of 1,000 ventilators to New York last week. As Dale Hurd reports, it's also part of a Chinese strategy to make them look like the good guy in the coronavirus pandemic.
Some are calling it mask diplomacy. Chinese shipments of much-needed medical equipment pouring into capitals around the world. This aid arriving in London says keep calm and combat coronavirus. Experts say it's an unprecedented campaign by the communist dictatorship to change the coronavirus narrative. The Chinese government is working overtime to make the world forget that it was responsible for the severity of the coronavirus outbreak and to sell the idea that China is now the hero that is saving the world. This Chinese video is making the rounds on social media.
In many movies, one single American can save the world. However, in reality, when the mankind facing a big crisis, it is China who stands out and saves the world.
Web analysis shows China flooded Italy with Twitter bots in March, pushing the theme that Italy was grateful for Chinese help. This Chinese video in which Italians were supposedly thanking China was actually Italians thanking Italian medical workers. But some in the Western media have bought the Chinese propaganda, with NBC saying China has asserted itself as the global leader.
They're getting some help from American media outlets and others in amplifying and legitimating this false narrative.
Alessandra Bocchi, a freelance journalist based in Rome, wrote in the Wall Street Journal that at least some of China's aid to Italy was actually sales of surplus supplies China doesn't need anymore.
First of all, it's important to note that the reason why there's a shortage of masks now in Western countries is because they were all shipped to China at the beginning of the outbreak. And second of all, they're not actually donating those masks in many cases.
Bocchi blames China for the severity of the outbreak in Italy.
Why didn't China, as the outbreak started, warn Italy of how severe this was going to be? Why did it only come to Italy's rescue when it was so bad that the country had to plead for help?
But emboldened by the success of its good guy propaganda, China is now lecturing the U.S. on its response to coronavirus. Here's a news anchor from Chinese TV.
As of March 27th, the U.S. has overtaken China as the country with the most number of positive cases. All this could have been avoided.
Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Trying to change the narrative. Pat?
You know, I've thought for so many years, I've been to China so many times, and I saw a movement toward Christianity was taking place in China. Millions of Chinese people were accepting Christ. There was a freedom and an unbelievably move of God's Spirit. And I predicted clearly that China was going to be the largest Christian nation on the earth. Well, Xi Jinping, the current leader of China, has reversed all that. He has become a dictator of massive proportions. He has persecuted not only the Uyghurs, who are the extreme Muslims, but he's also persecuting Christians, closing churches, making it difficult for churches to operate, shutting down any kind of discussion of Christianity. It's a total change. And this man has established a a dictatorship that's more pervasive probably than what was under the reign of Mao Zedong. And here China had such opportunity. But now, instead of being our warm friend and partner in the world, they're actually becoming our enemy. And that's a terrible thing. I mean, it saddens me a great deal. Ephraim.
Pat, CBN's Operation Blessing is delivering masks to first responders in several states, delivering about 12,000 masks to cities in Florida, including Jacksonville, Orlando, and Tampa. 2 counties in Texas also received masks and more than 140 Home Depot buckets full of cleaning supplies to keep emergency vehicles virus-free. Operation Blessing has also given more than 30,000 masks to hospitals and first responders in Virginia, Florida, Texas, and Tennessee. Operation Blessing, hard at work. Pat?
Thank you very much. And by the way, if you want to help Operation Blessing, the number is 1-800-700-7000. And needless to say, we're sending out 40,000 N95 face masks and sanitizing kits. And the big thing is we've got a feeding center that are carrying trucks with relief supplies all across America. And you can be part of that. We'd be glad to have you do it. But I'm just thrilled to see what is able to be done. But we've got to help people. Wherever they are, we've got to help people. And yes, we're all in this thing together. And it's a terrible thing, but we're going to get through it. We are going to survive.